Hello, I'm Dr. Elizabeth Coyne, and with me today I have Professor Bronwyn Griffin, and she's going to explain about her research and how she went from an emergency nurse at the bedside to really changing practice. So, welcome, Bronwyn.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And thanks everyone for listening in. This is just one of the simple stories of one of the research projects I've been conducting over the last sort of 6 years that really started with my interest being spiked at the bedside in emergency, and particularly in pediatric emergency, and thinking about things, the impact that we can have at the bedside, and what is the evidence around the things that we do. And for me, that was around the effect of 20 minutes of cool running water within the first 3 hours of the patient injury.
Yeah, so it's such a simple idea, but let's hear how you actually got to that idea and the process.
Yeah, I've been lucky enough over the last few years to work with some great researchers, and one of those was a laboratory scientist who looked at some of the porcine animal models of burn injury and the effect of 20 minutes of cool running water or different durations of running water. And so she was able to look at the different temperatures, durations, and compared these in a controlled animal environment, and was able to see, you can see in that bar graph, that the 20 minutes of cool running water was by far the most effective at improving time to healing in the pig model. So
Yeah.
it was really that kind of sparked my interest, and we went from there.
Yeah, what a great sort of way to start to really look at the science behind it.
Yeah.
The way burns are formed in our bodies. So
Yeah.
yeah, and so when from that, then sort of how did you go to your next steps to sort of get this as practice?
Yeah, so we were looking at some of those laboratory studies. We knew that we really needed to understand more about progressing it from the basic research into the effects. And so we could understand that, yes, it reduced the tissue temperature, it dampens the inflammatory response and reducing swelling, but how does that look in a human
Yeah,
model? So fortunately, we were able to conduct our own study, but we also have looked at other human studies as well, and we've published capturing data within the Children's Hospital. We were
yeah,
able to look at sort of 2,500 children and how their clinical
yeah,
outcomes were impacted. It's not practical or ethical to run a randomized control trial,
yes,
but
difficult.
but we've certainly been able to do some, prospective or ongoing human studies in this way to look at those and observe those differences.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things with research is that you look at your topic and you work out the best way to actually explore and evaluate and to come up with new treatments. And I think the way Bronwyn's gone through her research from both the clinical scientific to the human and understanding and including a diverse range of participants as well, Bronwyn.
And one of the things was we realized that there were lots of isolated studies around the world, and one of the things that we wanted to do was try and find a way that we could amalgamate all of that
Yeah.
literature. And one of those was around doing a systematic literature review and meta-analysis. So by putting all of those studies together, you're able to increase the power of your outcomes and or your statistical results, I guess. And by doing that, we were able to show that there were these really specific outcomes that were dramatically or statistically significantly improved. And they were around things like full thickness burns. The odds of having a full thickness burn was reduced, which means that the patient is less likely to have, they'll have faster wound
Yeah.
healing, they'll have less hospital
Yeah.
admissions and some really great outcomes. So having that power added to the outcomes is really helpful
Yeah.
as well.
And one of the things with that is it is a cost factor, which enabled you to actually get funded because it's not only the patient's aspect, but it was a cost factor to hospitals, to patients,
Yeah.
which was really sort of then able to move your research forward and to sort of really look at the benefits for patients.
Yeah, yeah. So those benefits were really clear. I think, just like you said, benefits for the patients, benefits for the hospitals. No, nobody wants to come to hospital for
Yeah.
longer or more often for their changes of dressing. But we also recognized, I think, progressing through this research that it's not always accessible. Most burn injuries happen in the residential
Yeah.
home, but for some patients, the environment or the patient is too critically unwell, or the environment is too dangerous. There
Yeah.
might be bushfires.
Yeah.
The organization, you might be working in an emergency department where your shower room is clogged up as a storeroom, so it's just making sure that your environment's
Yeah.
just right and conducive.
Yeah, and that's an interesting fact, because a lot of the times with research, when you're the researcher, you know the best practice, but it's actually implementation is what can actually work in the clinical areas. And so I know your research did a lot of that implementation to actually really start to get hospitals and emergencies to think about what they need to do to implement your actually outcomes.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So one of our obligations is to be an advocate as a nurse, and that's not just at the bedside. For me,
Mm.
that's also in changing practice, changing guidelines, changing legislation. And so for me, one of that is to look at evidence base across the world.
Yeah.
And we've certainly been able to change practice and to change guidelines here in Australia and New Zealand. But one of the things that I noticed is that this was not practice in the US. And that's a large population in a developed country
Yeah.
that should be able to develop and deliver this intervention. So having that consensus and moving that forward has been really important. So, like you said, finding the right partners in implementation is critical. And even though this is a burn injury, which is typically looked after by a burn surgeon, because the window of opportunity for this
Yeah.
intervention is so short, actually our partners sit within the emergency department and even pre-hospital.
Yeah.
So we really wanted to look at how we implement this, and including those partners from here in Australia, some burn surgeons, laboratory scientists, myself. I led a grant in the US with the Department of Defense, and we were awarded that grant to really move forward the implementation of
Yeah.
that within California specifically, which we're doing at the moment.
Yeah, because I think one of the things that you think of with burns is that it happens in a home and there hopefully is water, but there may not be running water. And so sort of the people first on that are the ambulance and the firemen, aren't they?
Yeah.
And so I know you work quite closely with them
Yeah,
in
I've
future grants.
just got back from LA, where recently they've had fires. They often have wildfires. They call them in the US our bushfires, and they are really austere environments. And working out ways to be able to deliver water in that
Yeah.
environment when it's such a scarce resource is really important. But it's now at the forefront of their mind,
Yeah.
and we've just had some great conversations with their firefighters about delivering that
Yeah.
in those austere environments. So
Yeah.
it's definitely moving ahead. So this particular project now is well and truly situated within Sacramento, which is kind of north central California. But we're now working with other states and other
Yeah.
authorities to change the guidelines, changing practice, and scaling that across across the US.
Yeah, and I think one of the beauties of your research, Bronwyn, is you were a nurse at the bedside.
Yeah.
You identified, can we do this better?
Mm.
And then it's led to an international change of practice where, people are really reflecting on the way they deliver burns care, and all for the patient outcomes, which is what you as advanced practice nurses can think about in your areas of how can you sort of look at some practice and think, is there a better way to do this?
Yeah, I think, and looking beyond yourself and your own remit, for me, just working as an emergency nurse, I wasn't really seeing the impact of the practice that I was delivering. Often it takes days, weeks, months to see the effect of
Yeah.
the interventions that you're performing. So knowing that the small thing that I do here is going to make a big impact here. And I think it's the same for pre-hospital, and making sure that you've got your key stakeholders involved in that conversation to understand the complexity of problem solving
Yeah.
and implementation.
Yeah.
And I think that's for us, that's been, having that team aspect. This is just a fun picture of, the unexpected partnerships that you can
Yeah.
come across. When I first wrote this grant to change implementation, it wasn't really firefighters that I had in mind, but it soon became
Yeah.
really obvious that these guys were going to be the change heroes. And so you've really got to kind of be agile in thinking about how you change practice.
Yeah. And thank you so much, Bronwyn, for talking about this, because I think it gives everyone at the bedside an opportunity to think, maybe they could
Yeah.
be the next person that changes practice and improves patient outcomes.
Yep. Stay curious and ask questions. I think.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Elizabeth.